You're listening to Remotely One, a podcast that educates, entertains, and inspires you to take your life back from the office commute. I'm Rick, a former beer rep who left the warehouse to become a voice actor and digital creator.
And I'm Kaleem, a remote work advocate and consultant. We're going to speak with some of the top professionals who have managed to avoid the commute as they share stories from the most inspiring to the most comical, all while working remotely.
Man, this sounds awesome. Let's clock in.
I've done one full Ironman. I competed in the Ironman World Championship, actually.
Wow.
Jesus, we are way out of our league.
Way out of our league, bro. About the Ironman competitions. So it's a combination of what?
A full Ironman distance is a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, and then a full marathon after all that. So 26.2.
Oh my
This
God.
is all in one day.
Oh yeah, all in one go.
This is all.
Yeah, you start at the crack of dawn and you finish in the dark.
Jeez.
Yeah, man, it was 2 years of training, and I loved every second of it except for the parts I didn't love.
Okay, so out of curiosity, which ones were you the best at?
You know, I'm a much stronger cyclist than swimmer or runner.
Okay.
But in my Ironman, I actually had a great swimming day. My cycling, I was terrible because it was 96 degrees and 40-mile-an-hour winds, and it was awful.
Yeah, so there's this movie. It was called I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker, from a long time ago. It's a hilarious movie. Check it out.
I will.
There's this one scene where the dude has all these gold chains on, and he dies from wearing too many gold chains. It's called He ODs on Gold Chains. Fucking hysterical, right?
He overgolded.
What was it, Rick? What did he say?
He overgolded.
Yes, he OG. They call it over gold. The funniest line was every time someone looks at the picture, they're like, damn. How'd he go to the bathroom with all that stuff on? So the first thing I always think about when Ironman's, this poop going down your leg, isn't there, Mike?
They have porta potties. And if you are a professional triathlete, they maybe would. But a bum like me that's just out there to finish, there's porta potties, man. You just get off the bike and you go like a regular person.
You take the time, you unzip, and you sit.
Take your time, man. My bike was 6 hours and 40 minutes, but I don't know, a good 20 minutes of that was going to the bathroom.
Well done.
Welcome back to Remotely One. I am your co-host, Rick Haney, joined by my esteemed colleague and co-host, Kaleem Clarkson. What's going on, man?
Oh, you're looking great today, baby. Look at those baby blue eyes, dog.
Look at him. Just look.
I mean, you look wonderful, man. We're just sitting in the studio. I can't complain, man. I can't complain. And there's no leaf blowers, so we'll see. But I can't promise that.
We'll find out. We'll find out. Hey, everybody. Glad to have you back. Since you know how to find us now, do us a huge favor. Go to ratethispodcast.com/remotely one. Just leave us a review. Again, that's ratethispodcast.com/remotely one. If you could do that for us, we would be ever so thankful. Since 2015, Remotely One is one of the largest communities of remote work professionals with over 3,000 Slack members.
We did it, man.
5,000 email subscribers. Holy shit, we're on the way, man. I can't believe it.
We passed 3,000.
It's free to join. So go ahead, check it out, remotely1.com. With that out of the way, Kaleem, give us a tease or two about today's guest.
Oh, bro, another moment where I'm nervous, bubble gut level nervous, yes. Our guest today just done so many things. Cool person, but intimidating. I mean, look at him. I'm nervous just looking at him in the camera. So let's see some of the things our guest has done, just a few things to make me feel not so great about what I'm doing. But here we go. First off, he's a graduate of BYU. So that he just starts it off
Boom,
strong.
Right out of the gate.
Right out of the gate. Yes. Guest, what's BYU's mascot? Do they even have one?
It's the Cougars.
Go Cougars. You. He's been a guest lecturer at Stanford University. He is a former software engineer turned entrepreneur 3 times, Rick. 3 times.
3 times founder. Co-founder, rather.
Yep. He is an avid fitness junkie, and he has participated in the Ironman World Championship. Can you imagine that, bro? Can you imagine?
No, actually, I cannot. I don't even want to think about it.
Guess what was your time? Do you remember your time, guest?
Just shy of 14 hours, which is not good, let's be clear.
Yo.
No, it's great.
It finished.
It's pretty great. Rick, what do you think? That's 30 hours better than us, probably?
Oh, at the very least. At the very least.
Well, they give you 17 hours to finish, so I had a little buffer at least.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Rick, our guest, he is the co-founder of Grain, which is an app where you can create highlights of your Zoom meetings. And they have raised, let's see, I think they've raised over 20 million in funding.
Oh, we got to hear more about this.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Listeners and viewers, please give a warm welcome to Mike Adams. Woo!
All right.
Let's go. It's not
Good
Mike
to have you,
Green,
Mike.
It's Mike Adams, baby. Let's go.
One and the same. One and the same.
Thanks for joining us, bro.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, we appreciate you tolerating us already, so we're off to a great start.
It's a hot start, and I'm loving it.
Oh, this is great. This is great. Before we begin, I always have to know, like, you know, you've had an amazing career so far. You've done a lot of things. You met with a lot of people. Do you recall a certain moment or a period in time that you just kind of had this aha moment and you knew that you were going to be doing what you're doing now?
I mean, I definitely remember being a teenager and thinking, like, I don't want a boss. And my dad like built houses for a living and owned his own company. And I have like a distinct memory of that when I was like 14. But, you know, I graduated from college and I got a boss. I got a job that came with a boss. And I think in the end, I've learned that that whole thing is just a myth. You always have a boss, whether it's an investor or your partners or whoever it is. Like, there's always that idea of no boss is totally a myth. But I've always kind of had that, I would say, feeling that I wanted to create and build something that was from scratch and kind of uniquely mine or my idea. And I feel like I started 2 companies with other people that were really their idea. And then that led me to kind of the insight that was Grain, that kind of where I got to be the founder CEO on the 3rd company I started. And so it's been quite the journey. You learn something along the way every time, and you can't really predict it. It's a lot of zigs and zags, but I would say directionally unsurprising from just kind of like what I've always wanted it to be. So it's a lot harder than I always thought it would be, though. There's a lot less glory and a lot more pain.
It's a grind, right?
It's a grind. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You've heard that so many times. So back to Grain, can you tell our listeners and viewers what is Grain specifically, and how did you conceptualize the idea? When did it hit you?
Yeah, totally. So Grain is a meeting recording, transcription, and note-taking service, increasingly powered by AI that you can actually program yourself. You can write your own prompts and create your own templates to get the AI to output the information from your meetings in the exact format you want, and then automatically synchronize it to the tools where you want it to go. So what I just pitched is like probably 3/4 of the way, you know, of what I thought it would be when I started it, but a lot has changed, and we can talk about that. But the origin of the company, of where it came from, was in 2016, I co-founded a company called Mission U. We were one of the very first like programming. We taught data analytics and actually did a lot of emotional intelligence. It's a 1-year alternative to college on income sharing agreements. And so if you're familiar with Lambda School that recently changed their name to Bloom Tech, they kind of came up big about a year after we sold to WeWork. So my whole premise was a recognition that if we were going to, you know, justify our venture scale, we'd raise like $12 million in funding from first round capital and great investors, that we needed to provide an offering that scaled. And obviously education is not, you know, especially when it's tied to outcomes, because the company didn't make any money unless the student got a job and paid a portion of that income for 3 years. Right. It has to work and it has to be good, but it's not necessarily scalable. And so because everything was happening in a Zoom classroom, I recognized that that was all unstructured data that could be leveraged and utilized to help us to try to, you know, reach this ambition of scaling. Ultimately, we didn't reach the ambition of scaling for various reasons, but the main one is this opportunity from WeWork came up. And when that happened, I said, you know what, I think this software we've been building for ourselves to record and manage, it's actually Zoom did all the recording, but we would just like pull it off the API and we'd manage the access and the content of those recordings, that was going to be a need much bigger than the school that we had, you know, built it for. And so that's kind of where the idea of Grain came from. We started it in 2018. I started it with my brother. and a longtime friend of 10 years from San Francisco. And yeah, it's kind of grown and evolved a lot since then. It took us about a year to figure out exactly what the product was. We built a version, to raise money on it, threw that version away, started over again. And then I'd say we're now about 3 years into, building on top of the foundation that is still currently the same core product.
Interesting. So I invited you on the show, Mike, because I think we presented a long time ago on a panel together. We had a couple cool conversations.
That was fun.
Cool guy. And plus you got me motivated to get on that Strava app and get my ass going. So I haven't been on there lately, but
me neither.
Yeah, we'll get back on there, Mike. We'll get back on there. 2024, I'm going to do it. The reason why I invited you on the show is, you publicly have said, like, you aren't a big fan of remote work. And in May of 2022, you posted it on LinkedIn, and I want to just quote what you posted, a little snippet from your post. And actually, before I read that, do you remember, like, it's got over 9,000 comments I've read.
Yeah.
Like over 300 shares. Any chance you know how many impressions you got?
It's like nearly 2 million, which is just kind of wild that these ramblings in my brain got that many eyeballs.
That's insane.
2 million impressions. You hear that, listeners? So share your feelings, share your thoughts, because people want to listen. So I'm going to quote what you posted in May of 22. And I quote, "Confession. I lead a fully remote company, but hate fully remote work. I miss the same energy, the camaraderie, the ease of collaboration, and I especially miss the casual taco truck combos. But I can also see, objectively, our team is better fully remote. The way my team works best isn't about what's best for me." Holy shit.
Powerful statement. That is a powerful statement.
Not one piece of news coverage, enough coverage obviously on the post.
Yeah.
I feel like this post should be in every single CEO's freaking notebook, handbook, whatever they're going to read. It should, especially that last sentence, the way my team works best isn't about what's best for me. Can you first tell us what motivated you to make and post that message, Mike?
I mean, a lot of the best writing I've read or done myself is just an act of creative exploration to explore an idea. And I knew that lead statement of I lead a fully remote company but hate fully remote work is just true. And I needed to figure out exactly like why and what to do about it. And so it was in the act of kind of writing this post that I kind of really figured that out. I would say I didn't lead. When I wrote those first words and explored this problem, I didn't actually know that was going to be the conclusion and the kind of bullet point takeaway of the post. I really didn't. I had kind of figured that out as in the act of writing it. And it was really this kind of active exploration for me about like what's going on in my brain and in my world. And then what does that actually mean for the company? And what was crazy is after I posted that word hate about fully remote work, the word hate didn't really apply that much anymore because I'd kind of sorted it out and I figured it out and made peace with it in a way that it was like, you know what, like I don't prefer it, but I ultimately can embrace that there are the benefits that outweigh the negatives for this moment and this environment. I'm not committed to being a fully remote company forever. But certainly our engineering team will stay fully remote forever. And I would say that it was in the act of kind of like writing and exploring it that we've been able to, I would say, be a better remote team because it's embraced that it is, the best for this team at this time. And I am ultimately glad that I'd spent the time to write it all out because I think otherwise it would have just kind of been this garble of thoughts and emotion in my head.
Sure.
So when you were writing the post, you were doing a self-evaluation kind of, like a self-reflection in a way. And when you read the post, you talk about the challenges that you personally had. Could you just talk about, like, as you were writing, could you talk about the challenges that you were personally having? And then what was it that was the light bulb that said, whoa, wait, I'm having this challenge. And I think you even added some statistics in there about what your team wants.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about what you were feeling, and then what was it? Was it the data? Like, what was it that made you say, hey, look, I'm going to do what they want to do, not what I want them to do?
You know, it's been interesting, and I would say it's still true, right? So like the things I disliked about remote work as forced by COVID, when you like couldn't be in person, I still dislike to this day. Like they're challenges. I think most people dislike them. You know, I list them out in the post, and circumstances change to where when I wrote that post, it was 11 months ago, I was working right here every day. And now I get on a plane and fly to Provo, Utah, where my business partner Jeff is. And we're hiring 2 people that are going to come into an office 2 days a week, 3 days a week. I'm probably going to hire 2 or 3 more people that are going to come into an office. And we're going to like reestablish I would say, kind of a hybrid situation to where our engineering team will always stay fully remote. It was fully remote well before COVID. You know, most of our engineers are in Europe and African time zones. So we have I would say, very spread remote team. But the thing that a lot of it is that it's changed in terms of that core premise of what I said in the post about what the team wants. What the team wants has been changing. And that is what's driving this change. And it's not me dictating that it has to be a certain way in order for you to work here. It's been interesting as we've hired new folks into roles, they want to come into the office. They don't want to come in every day. They want to come in, 2, maybe 3 days a week. And those who don't want to or can't, that's fine, right? It's established, there's trust, and it works. And so it's been really interesting to kind of use that premise of like, what does the team want? What is best for everybody? Not just what's best for me. I know what's best for me. It's not just that I can like, be there and oversee and look over. I think that we've overcome that in terms of it's just baked into the trust of how we operate. But it's for me, I just know I'm happier. I'm more charismatic. I'm more interested. I'm more energetic. There's just like a psychological boost that I get from being around people. So I get on a plane and I fly to where the people are, and it works great. It's definitely tougher on my wife than it is on me.
Sure.
And there's kind of this like feeling of like we could move if it becomes too bad, but we make it work. And that's where our team is at now. And I think that that's the conversation that's not really happening because it's very dictated. And I think that's the thing that got the reaction of the post is it's what the CEO wants. It's what the executive team wants. And I still, even though things are changing for us, I still believe that it's being driven by this realization I had in writing that post, that it's like, what's best for the team now? And it's not necessarily exactly what the CEO, or the executives want it to be.
So, I mean, honestly, you pretty much just answered my follow-up question to that. But say I'm a CEO who is extremely resistant to remote work. And I want asses in chairs. I want everybody here where I can see them. Based on your individual growth and your experience, is there any particular advice you would give to me as a fellow CEO?
I was at Notion HQ yesterday, and I was talking to one of the people in the growth team that I've known for a few years. I actually met him in I don't know if you remember or ever took a Lyft line. I don't think they do them anymore, but you'd like share a Lyft or an Uber with other people if you're like kind of going long haul.
Yeah, I could make it cheaper.
Yeah, it's cheaper. And so I shared a Lyft with this person, and that's how I met him, and he's awesome. And so he works at Notion now, and I was over at their HQ just catching up with him. And I really respected the way that Notion's handled it. Ultimately, from the very beginning, their CEO, Ivan, said, this is a temporary thing. We are coming back into the office. And I think that's really the problem that people are having now is that lack of clarity up front. Yeah. I have another friend, it's my brother-in-law who works at a hedge fund, and they were extremely clear. We are coming back into the office. We are coming back into the office. I think where the tension is when there was that ambiguity. Because the employees have been able to make a clear and conscious choice in the time since of like, I am, going to, there is an expectation here associated with this job of me going back into an office because that's the way that it was before. And I think like for grain, for example, I didn't set that expectation of us going back to the office. It was implied. And that's the thing I had to sort out. And I think that's the work that a lot of leaders need to do is to take some ownership and accountability. Like, did you set that clear expectation up front that we are going back to be this way? because that's how it was before, and that's the way that it has to be for this company because that's the way that it could dictate. Then that makes it a lot easier, frankly. That makes it clear and I'd say a lot more fair. And from my understanding of the conversation yesterday, Notion has basically everybody goes to an office at least 3 days a week in one of the various locations around the world. They have 600 employees. But I think that the real challenge is these companies where it's left ambiguous or where it was like kind of baked in and almost an expectation that they'd be fully remote and now they've switched. And that's a really, really tough thing to do. And I think that if that's what you're going to do, I think that the key has to be an honest conversation about what is preferred by the CEO or the leadership, and then what is preferred by the workforce and people, and find an actual, like, have an open conversation, find an actual compromise. And frankly, that's where we've landed with Grain, and I feel really good about it because it's been this kind of, I vocalized that need after that post of like, I don't like remote work. I don't like working in my house 5 days a week, especially in the summertime when my kids are home. They went back to school on Tuesday, and I'm a much like happier work from home employee as a result. Right. But like, it just has to be a dialogue. And I think that's the resistance and that's the feeling and that's the frustration and the root of it that's happening, I think, in this conversation is this lack of conversation. And there's a certain company size where that becomes a lot more difficult. And I get it, but I do think it's really rooted in a lack of clear communication and expectation setting up front that people are frustrated about.
You know, you mentioned something earlier that's fascinating where you're talking about trust. Trust is really important here. The challenges that I'm noticing, so let's just talk about a company that wasn't very clear about what was going to happen. You work for about a year and a half and you're still productive, right? Things are still happening. But, you know, the CEO says, hey, we're going back to the office. Actually, let's just pretend that it's a situation when they said, yes, we are coming back after the pandemic. And they were very clear. How do you kind of engage in trusting your employer when you've proven over a year that we're productive? And then when they say, well, we're bringing everybody back to the office, there is nothing that supports or you don't even articulate the reasons why. To me, that seems like that's where a lot of yes, there's tension on both sides, but to me, that's where the real heavy tension is. So what would you kind of advise to leaders that are just going to say, hey, we're coming back to the office. I told you before, I don't care how productive you were. What would you kind of advise in that situation? Like, how do you manage that, you know?
I think I have two comments. One is that most companies I've seen that they're in the crossfire of the conversation, I would, number one, recognize how the situation is different now than it was before, because it probably is. Because even what I'm talking about with like Notion, for example, I believe they were like 5 days a week in person before, and now they're like 2, maybe 3. That's a fundamental shift from the way that it was before. And so there is a recognition, and a lot of times it's like, man, but I really liked it being fully, or I have to like relocate, or whatever it may be. Like, there is more flexibility now than there was before in most cases. So if that is the case, it's easy for us to, have this kind of like loss aversion and feel like re-anchored to like whatever it is that we want. But I think it is important to remember how different it is from before, if at all. And in most cases, I think it is different than before. So that can just like help psychologically with a worker to recognize that they do have that freedom and they do have that more trust than there was before. And we actually are in a net better place off. So that's number one. Number two, I would say, is like there might just be a mismatch. And that can be a catalyst to move on. I know a lot of companies are using the return to office as a forcing function to get people to quit instead of laying them off. I think it's disingenuous. I don't support that. I personally don't want to lead that way. We haven't done that at Grain. I won't do that at Grain. And that's probably a big part of the feeling of frustration, rightfully so, on the employee side, because it's kind of a disingenuous, it's not kind of, it's explicitly a disingenuous reason. But I think it's important to recognize that that is the signal that the company is sending about the action they actually want to take. And it might not necessarily be what the surface of it looks like. And so as an employee, you always have that agency and that right to recognize that you can, take your talents to South Beach, as LeBron says, like that empowerment, just like an employer can choose, what happens from an employee relationship, the employee has that same right. And we do live in a new and open world, and you might love those coworkers or those relationships, but maybe it's been 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And most employees usually stay at a company between, 18 to 24 months. And so it could just be one of those, catalysts for change to find that environment that is actually, going to be more conductive to what you as an employee wants. And so I think that ultimately this return to office is kind of a catalyst for change. And I think most of the time change is good. And I think the emotion that comes up with it is that kind of, I don't know, that disingenuousness or that unfairness or whatever else it may be. And I've learned through 10 years of therapy that a lot of times you just kind of have to like talk it out and really understand what's happening. And then you can process. And a lot of times those emotions go away and you can end up having a mindset to where it's like, kind of viewed as an opportunity and a good thing. And I think that that's true from both the employer and the employee side when it's done right and there's honest communication about the reasons.
That was interesting because for me, I think it's a pretty simple answer for leaders. Just tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not about the culture because you weren't measuring the culture before. It's not about any of the reasons that people are talking about. Just say why you want that to be. If you're like, I want to be able to see my employees and I want to be able to see that they're working, say it. If you have a really expensive office that you just built, Salesforce, right? And you just spent $1 billion on it and you have stock shareholders and you have all these things, these external pressures that are, requiring you to take more advantage of your investment because, hey, no one wants to see their commercial investment drop. Say that shit, man. Just say it. Like, be honest. Don't be like, oh, well, we just think it's better, especially when you don't have data on it. So for me, I just kind of feel like it's not that complicated. We're all adults. Just come out and say why the reason is versus trying to do all this backtrack and shit. You know what I mean? It just doesn't feel genuine, right? Like Salesforce buys Slack. Slack's huge from being remote. And then they're just like, everybody come back to the office. We're done with the, Slack future form. Just say why, say the reason. So I just kind of feel like there's just too much fluff in these returns,
Yeah. I mean, one thing that has come up several times in the last several moments is knowing what the employees want. So I'm just curious, has Grain taken any specific steps to make sure that the employees are happy with the remote employee experience? And if not, what have you done to address those concerns?
There's a distinction as well between what people want and what's actually best, right?
Yes.
And to Kaleem's point, that coercion or that manipulation of being told what's best for me and when I don't agree is what is so off-putting for folks. It's like, no, it's not best for me because I have to pick up my kids. I have to do X and Y and Z and I have a bigger life than work, etc. And so it's not best. So ultimately it comes down to a conversation. Like there has to be a conversation. It has to be a two-way street. And that takes time. And the larger the company, the harder it is to understand the individual circumstances of what's best for everybody. So you have to create, proxies for that, surveys, and ultimately you're not going to come to a conclusion. It's impossible the larger the company gets to get to a conclusion of what's best for everybody. But that's how a lot of organizations and society work of what's best for, we use this proxy of the majority or as many people as possible or the maximal amount. And I think that that's probably the best that can be done. But even if as an employee, I don't necessarily get what's best for me or what I think I want, if I've had an honest, genuine conversation and I feel like there's been a dialogue and that there's been a process that feels like reasonable and fair and democratic, that I actually have a voice, then I can deal with an outcome that's different than what I want or what's even best for me because it wasn't dictated to me. It wasn't done in spite of me and in spite of what I think is best. And I feel like in corporate environments, it's so easy. And I have the luxury of having a small team. We only have 25 people. So it's easy to have conversations with everybody. And a lot of times you don't even have to have the conversation because I'm not asking, the majority of our team is half of our team is engineers that work and live remotely in completely different time zones. And there's just no world in which I'd ever dream to require them to move to the US. But I do think that the core there is just that recognition that it doesn't necessarily have to be what's best for everybody. There just has to be a recognition of participation and communication around these needs And then I think a lot of those individual things can be accounted for once that conversation has taken place. But it's just a blanket mandate. That's what I think leaves people with a bitter taste in their mouth. And I think, unfortunately, at least from my casual observation, that's the majority of the communication I'm seeing. But again, a lot of times these are huge companies, and it becomes more difficult to do it that ideal way the larger the company gets.
Yeah, you absolutely hit it on the head. You know, the conversation sounds a lot different when you're like, A, everyone must return to the office starting on Monday, 4 days a week, versus, hey, we collected this data, we've had town halls, here's the data, X percentage of you want to work remotely, X percentage you don't. Hey, we've heard you, but unfortunately we just built this brand new building, right? And, you know, we are a leader in our community, and downtown is depending on us some way, you know, and we want to have that vibrant energy, and we want that vibrant energy to be available for our new workers. So that's why we're asking people to come into the office. That sounds way different than you're coming into the office 5 days a week, you know? So you're absolutely right. The conversation, and then, you know, having some sort of, not necessarily, data, but then a purpose. Like, we're doing this because, not we're just doing this. So anyway, I appreciate that answer, man. I'm right there with you.
Very insightful. So, Mike, could you do us a favor and share with us a story that you found inspirational, comical even, something that happened while you were working remotely that you will absolutely never forget?
Okay, so I have a grain clip because we create highlight clips for this story. I was actually in our empty office when this happened. I was needed to get out of my house, and San Francisco is, you know, I don't live in San Francisco area even anymore, but this is in a month and a half before I moved. So I'm up in the office by myself. Everybody else is fully remote, and we're having our leadership meeting. And in the middle of the leadership meeting, it just had started, and we're just kind of, you know, just small talk, catching up. And in the, you know, one of the squares in the Zoom, our head of engineering just literally disappeared. He was there. He kind of we didn't really notice that he froze. And then all of a sudden, everything else is the same, and he was gone. And so then the rest of us were all like, what in the world just happened? Because normally someone stands up or they disconnect and their video goes off, but instead it was the video was still there, but he was gone. It was like he teleported. And so we were just kind of observing that, laughing at that, and then he walked back into the room, you know, from wherever he teleported to, and he said that the reason he teleported was because his Roomba knocked his Eero Wi-Fi out of socket. And we all just had kind of a technological laugh moment that the reason why he teleported and his Wi-Fi went out was because a robot knocked out, you know, his internet. And we just all thought that was really funny, and it ended up becoming a grain clip that's 45 seconds long that is constantly shared in our Slack as a funny moment in grain history. And, you know, I tweeted it out, and it got a pretty good reaction, but I'll link it to you so you can share it in the show notes.
Oh, please do.
It's just kind of fun. And the fact that we had a recording of it, because we record everything, helped kind of codify it into grain folklore and make it into something that otherwise would have just been a moment. But because we had it recorded and we could watch it back, it ended up being kind of funny and hilarious, something we revisit now.
Wow, damn that iRobot. The robots are taking over.
Yeah.
That's right.
It was just the most work from home in 2020 whatever thing ever is my Roomba knocked my Eero out. So I sorry about that.
Beam me up, Scotty.
Yeah.
Beam me
amazing.
That is great.
So where can our listeners and viewers find you, Mike?
So I tweet when I'm able. I haven't been tweeting a lot lately, but I'm actually going to start doing a little bit more as we've made some hires.
Are you sure you're not Xing? You sure you're not Xing?
I'm Xing. Yeah, that's inappropriate, Kaleem.
We'll leave that where it stands.
Exactly.
I'm Xing now.
Yeah, honey, that X site. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so I'm on Xer or whatever you want to call it, just Michael Glenn A. And then I post on LinkedIn as well. And then I'm just Mike at grain.com if you ever want to shoot me an email. Grain.co will work too.
Cool. Well, you've been extremely insightful. Thank you for tolerating our nonsense for the better part of this hour. We appreciate you, and hopefully you can join us again soon.
I would love to.
I'll see you on that Strava, Mike. I'll talk to you.
I'm on it. You've inspired me.
24, I'm going to be there.
That sounds good. Thanks, y'all.
Peace.
You've been listening to Remotely One. Visit us at remotely1.com/podcast for upcoming episodes. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and download our episodes on your favorite podcast app.
Hey, don't forget to clock out.